Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Krista Costas-Bradstreet. I'm the Director of Policy and Partnerships for the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association, or CPRA. We are thrilled to welcome such a large group today to discuss the reopening of parks and trails. So obviously a very important and timely topic to everyone across the country. So thank you so much for joining us. Before I introduce you to our speakers, I just want to briefly introduce you to CPRA, and then I will turn the remainder of the webinar over to today's speakers. So the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association is a national organization dedicated to realizing the full potential of parks and recreation as a major contributor to community health and vibrancy. Over its 60-year history, CPRA has been the national voice for parks and recreation, advancing the collective interests of our members. CPRA is a national network dedicated to the well-being of people, communities, and the natural and built environments. And CPRA provides services for our members and partners that cultivate dialogue, learning, and innovation. In terms of our collective strength, we are actually a network of 13 members, and those are our provincial and territorial associations across the country. We have a board of directors made up again of the 13 provinces and territories. We have staff, volunteers, government partners, allied sectors that all contribute to moving our strategic goals forward, and those were the ones that I described earlier. We do have a national office. We're actually spread across the country, so we do work virtually. We have a CEO, myself as Director of Policy and Partnerships, Director of Communications, and our administrator, MJ, who is critical to helping us run these webinars, and so my thanks to her. What I'd like to do now is pass this over to Gord Tate, and Gord is going to give you a little bit of an introduction to CPRA and its efforts around COVID-19. Gord is the Active Living Coordinator at Community Development Recreation in the municipality of Chester, Nova Scotia. He is one of our newest board members at CPRA, and he'd like to offer some words of welcome and information on behalf of the CPRA Board of Directors. So Gord, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Krista. Good day, everyone. So on behalf of the board, I just want to welcome everyone and thank you for committing your time today. Although COVID has presented many challenges for all of us, I think we've all also benefited by having this shared experience. COVID has become the identity for the diverse set of challenges that we've all faced and have had to find solutions for. I'm incredibly proud of the work that CPRA and all the provincial territorial partners have been doing recently. In my case in Nova Scotia, I've never seen the sector come together so frequently and effectively before. All associations have demonstrated leadership, galvanized communities, and really helped capture the value people place on recreation and parks and their importance in society. CPRA specifically, as you can see on the slide in front of you, has really been the national nexus for communication, monitoring, and advocacy in support of this sector. Our hope today is that each of you will be able to find relevance in your context in the experiences shared by the presenters, no matter if you're rural or urban, big or small, or in phase 1 or phase 3 of reopening. MJ, if you just click ahead perhaps there to the next slide. And just so you know, if you're not familiar, much of the work that CPRA has been doing recently has been captured in this COVID-19 page on their website. There you'll find a Google Drive with a lot of resources that have been collected, but also know that there's a new portal that will be coming soon that you'll be able to access this information and a whole lot more as well. So thank you again, everyone, for your contributions today, both the presenters and the folks on the line. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Krista.
Thanks, Gord. Totally appreciate it and you being here today with us. So before I turn it over to the speakers, I just want to let you know what we'll do is we'll have all 4 speakers present, and then we'll open it up to questions. So many of you are probably familiar with GoToMeeting or other forms of meetings, online meetings. There is a chat box. We welcome you or welcome your comments and your questions. So please feel free to put them in there. Between MJ and myself, we will monitor the questions. And then with about 15 minutes left to go in the webinar, I will read out some of the questions. If you have a question for a specific speaker, maybe just note that as well in the chat box. and we will get to as many questions as we can. Again, we think we're going to have a fairly large group, so what I will try and do, we'll try and cut out all the questions from the chat box and get some answers back to you when we let you know that the link is live on our site as well. So we are recording the webinar, and you will be able to look back and listen to it again if you want, or share it with your colleagues. So hopefully that all makes sense. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Justin Ellis is a professional outdoor recreation, parks, and trails consultant with over 15 years of diverse experience. For the past 9 years, he has worked as a consultant for local, regional, provincial, and federal government and NGO clients throughout Western Canada. Prior to that, he was the manager of regional planning for Alberta Tourism, Parks and Recreation, the provincial outdoor recreation specialist for Alberta Public Lands, and a seasonal conservation officer with Alberta Parks. Justin was also one of the founders of Leave No Trace Canada. He now calls beautiful Victoria, BC home, and gets out on the trails and parks as much as possible with his 2 kids and partner, Aaron. So thank you so much, Justin, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Krista. Welcome, everybody. We could spend, clearly, hours and hours talking about the implications of COVID-19 on restarting our parks and our outdoor spaces. I've been given 10 minutes. So with that constraint, I've focused on 3 key ideas or implications that I wanted to share with you. The first implication is that our outdoor spaces, as I like to say it, are having a moment, and it's a really, really big moment. Parks and open spaces have always been important to our community, but since COVID, they've jumped to the big stage in a big way. With public health measures beginning to relax, there's many metrics as well as anecdotal information, professional input that are all confirming that parks and our outdoor spaces are being enjoyed at greater rates than we've ever seen in the past. There's a few indicators, and our panelists will also talk about some of their local indicators, but there's a few indicators that really highlight this trend. One of which is Google Mobility Reports, which just as of last week for Canada has indicated a 101% increase over baseline visitation to park spaces. Our trail and our traffic counters throughout our networks are showing much higher visitation rates, some ranging at up to 100 to 200% higher. Our bicycle and retail stores are showing much higher sales of bicycles. RV Easy, which is a peer-to-peer travel trailer rental network, has experienced a 700% increase in rental bookings, which is their highest ever. And traveler intent research that's undertaken by our destination marketing organizations are all showing the desires, rapidly increasing desires to visit parks and outdoor spaces, which are much higher than other attractions throughout the country. Why are we seeing this uptick? At this point in time, I haven't found any empirical research that confirms this, but I think there's some really obvious reasons. The first of which is that there's simply more people at home, the kids aren't in school, and there's more leisure time available for folks to get out and enjoy these park spaces. I think also residents are really recognizing the physical and mental health benefits that come from parks and outdoor spaces, and they're really seeking these right now in this immense time of stress. Probably one of the most important during the pandemic has been that public health officials have pretty clearly articulated that being outdoors is certainly safer than being in indoor environments, and this has really encouraged local outdoor recreation to occur. And through that, people intuitively feel safer outdoors. They can physically distance much easier, and they feel less threatened. And then finally, and one of the key points, I think, is that parks and outdoor experiences are an affordable opportunity for Canadians, and many of which are under some pretty tough financial stress right now. I think this uptick is likely here to stay for the foreseeable future. For example, research undertaken by Destination BC in the last few weeks is showing, looking at intentions of travelers, is showing that most travelers who are also our residents here in Canada intend to take a trip within their own community in the next month to 4 months, but far fewer of them intend to travel to other provinces. This means that we're going to have more people staying local in the near future, and our parks and our open spaces are at the top of their hit list for experiences. But with this, I think the face of our visitors are going to change. Many of the visitors in our parks this summer and over the winter will be new to parks and trails. They'll be first comers and infrequent visitors. We won't see the same density of interprovincial and certainly international visitors in our parks this year. And we're likely to see many more Canadians who would typically travel abroad or outside of your home province, not doing so, and they're going to stay and enjoy your parks and your open space and your trails this summer. These increases in visitation are certainly going to come with challenges for our outdoor space managers. We're seeing earlier peak season visitation rates, and we're going to see those rates last longer into the fall and the shoulder season. And this is going to create both the need for early and longer staffing within the networks. We're seeing increased visitation is going to absolutely create greater demands for maintenance and servicing of these spaces. It could create greater demands for emergency responses. And it's certainly, without a doubt, going to create greater demands on all of our parks and open space managers for better and more thorough visitor management. And unfortunately, all of these demands, they're coming at a time when our managers have faced layoffs. In addition to this growth right now, the demand is happening just as the capacity for our outdoor spaces and amenities are being reduced. For example, campgrounds in Alberta have reduced their capacity by 50%. So the opportunity's never been greater to truly position our parks and our outdoor spaces as the essential services that they are with our decision makers and elected officials throughout this country. We have this opportunity, and hopefully we can take advantage of it. MJ, okay, great, you've jumped. So, oh no, go back one. There we go. So the importance of parks, the second point is around oh, sorry, MJ, go to the number 2. There we go. The importance that parks play in preserving biodiversity, enhancing the physical and mental health are well established and they're commonly known. But for many of our communities here in Canada, the role that our parks and our outdoor spaces can play as economic drivers, I think, is tenuous at best. In some of our communities, certainly our outdoor spaces are acknowledged as important to our local economy, but it always comes with this challenging push and pull relationship with other values that these spaces are trying to achieve. Right or wrong, I do think that in our new normal, at least for the foreseeable future, parks and our outdoor spaces and our trails are going to rapidly become essential economic assets, and they're going to be key components of many of our community economic recovery strategies. If done right, this is generally a good thing. Canada's visitor economy has been one of the most significantly impacted industries by COVID. Millions of international visitors and Canadians stopped traveling immediately, and this has forced the closure of businesses and the loss of thousands of jobs. And for some communities, the visitor economy is the backbone of their entire economy. So though many destinations are turning their focus to hyper-local and intra-provincial travel markets to try to bolster some form of economic activity this year, the reality is that these short-haul domestic travelers spend far less than our longer-haul domestic travelers and our international travel, and it will be very difficult, if not impossible, for the local visitation to make up the gap in the economic difference. So as parks and outdoor managers, we have the opportunity, the need to understand the realities facing our visitor economy, and likely should anticipate the potential political expectation that our parks, trails, and outdoor spaces play a much greater role in economic recovery of the visitor economy. But making meaningful contributions is more than just having all kinds of people in our parks. We need to work with the private sector to create new and find new or expanded services and experiences, more enriched experiences that can help leverage greater visitor spending. By doing so, by creating these experiences, we'll be giving our visitors an easy reason to spend a bit more on their outings, which will help us close that gap that we are absolutely going to face this year. We should hopefully we can think a bit differently about our relationship with our partners in the visitor economy and look at how we can, as a system, advance the spending and through greater experiences of our short haul visitors. Parks managers and outdoor managers have an opportunity to strategically identify business opportunities and places where businesses can transition to or establish in our parks in order to support these, what we know will be increased visitation demands and changing expectations. Just a few examples that we're seeing across the country are transitioning restaurants to outdoors, mobile food providers, tour businesses, rental businesses, sports tourism. All of this effort is certainly going to take and require a review of many of our policies and our bylaws and our planning mechanisms that are in place so that we can create the right environment to support the restart and the success of the incredibly important visitor economy. But it's not going to just be about that policy environment. We need, in order to entice residents and visitors to return, we really need to maintain and even build greater visitor confidence in our parks. It's essential that visitors to our parks feel safe while they're enjoying these outdoor spaces. And to do so, just a second, MJ. To do so, we'll need to develop deliberate communication protocols and communicate those to our visitors so that they understand what we're doing to help keep them safe and manage visitation. But at the same time, it's going to be equally as important that we build local destination host community confidence and support for inviting visitors back to our outdoor spaces. Working with our elected officials, our community leaders, our public health agencies, we can run these communication campaigns and these efforts locally to engage those local residents, all with the goal of helping them feel comfortable with visitation and helping them understand what we're doing to make sure visitation is responsible. And doing all of this will help us with supporting that visitor economy. The third and final idea, if you switch MJ, that I wanted to share with you is that visitor management never takes a back seat. Sound visitor management in our outdoor spaces certainly was a critical part of our role previous to COVID, but now with the significant increase and the health imperative that we have to stopping and slowing the spread, the evolving role that our outdoor spaces can play in maintaining the well-being of our residents and the desire to support and restart the visitor economy, the importance of effective visitor management has never been more clear. We will need to really invest in this area going forward. We've all seen those horror stories and pictures from across the country, across the US and other destinations of overcrowded parks and beaches and trails. Addressing those issues of what you see on the front of that is absolutely critical. And to do so, it's just as critical that our parks, our trails, and our outdoor space managers, as well as our elected officials, acknowledge that with the need to change those public behaviors comes a need to change our approaches and how we're actually planning for and managing visitors to these spaces. While there's much uncertainty around COVID, what is almost certain in my mind is that how we managed visitors previously and prior to COVID will not suffice in the interim or for the foreseeable future. We'll need to take deliberate steps to devise a comprehensive system-wide visitor management strategies for our entire outdoor space networks. And the most successful networks who are going to be able to really succeed at doing this will be ones that really do apply a comprehensive visitor management framework that looks at everything from site design and infrastructure through to ongoing visitor education, regulation, compliance, evaluation, and monitoring. There's many tools that we have in our visitor management toolbox, many of which, and far too many that I can't address today, but many of which the upcoming panel members will speak to and share. So to wrap up, I think at the end of the day, comprehensive visitor management will really help us avoid the horror stories that we've seen in the pictures. It'll help us manage the many competing values that our parks are working to achieve. It'll help us manage the very significant visitation that we have right now and build visitor and local host community confidence. And all of this will inherently help us support and rebuild our visitor economy. So with that, I'll stop there and turn it back to Krista.
Thank you so much, Justin. That was awesome. And now I'm going to turn it over to Matthew Roy. Matthew is a construction engineer with over 15 years experience in the design, construction, management, and commissioning of urban, rural, and industrial infrastructure for environmental purposes. As an advocate for sustainable development, he has cultivated strong technical expertise in the fields of soil, water, and air, as well as in waste management. He's been involved with the construction of several roads, composting plants, recycling centers, and has several projects related to waste management and treatment. And he has participated in the rehabilitation of contaminated sites, mainly of those former mines. Guided by his experience in sustainability, Matthew leads a passionate team of trail development managers and signage professionals as they continue to enhance the Great Trail of Canada and engage with communities from coast to coast to coast, not only through funding programs, but also by implementing and leading projects with a focus on inclusivity, safety, and active transportation. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Krista, for the introduction, and CPRA for the organization of this webinar. I'm really happy to be here today, and I will share part of a TCT effort towards COVID-19. Next. So for those who don't know the Great Trail, we manage a network of recreational trail of 27,000 kilometers. It starts from Cape Spear, Newfoundland, up to Victoria, BC. From north to south, it's from Tuktoyaktuk, Northwest Territories, to Windsor, Ontario. We offer a variety of trail experience, multi-use paths, single track, waterway, mixed-use trail, and cycling route. The Great Trail crosses 8 national parks, 155 provincial and territorial parks, and many park and conservation areas across the country. Next, please. So our first step in response to COVID was to launch in April and May a national survey to quantify the direct impact of COVID-19 on trail group. This survey also helped us to support our discussion with government around recovery plans for the benefits of trail, for example, tourism, health, employment, the youth, the volunteer, and green infrastructure. We received more than 400 responses representing all types of organizations, from municipality, association, volunteers, and agency. One of the questions we asked was, how do you manage or plan to manage the physical distancing on the trail? On this slide, you see interesting finding. So 31% of trails were closed or had reduced access. This leads us to ask ourselves an indirect question about the impact of these decisions. For example, are new illegal trails being built? Are people using the trail without permission and risking the landowner permission authorization? What are the impact on the environment? Are people creating permanent damage with using closed trail? More than 58% of trail were fully open, but only rely on self-regulation to enforce physical distancing. And only 11% were open with signage and patrol and enforcement to make sure that public health and safety measures were applied. Next. So another question was about the tourism destination. It was interesting to see that 78% of our respondents indicate they consider their trail as a one-day tourism destination, with most of benefiting from accommodation, local shop, tourism attraction that are located nearby their trail. We then ask ourselves if the trail group were really well equipped and prepared to provide a new trail experience to visitors. We also work with our provincial tourism partner to identify some key criteria to address that new trail experience. Some of those are, is the trail has proven permanent system in place, like signage, to ensure a safe enjoyment on the trail, knowing that people that might come to the trail are not the usual users. Is the trail information is available online, somewhere that the visitor can get access to the most up-to-date information? What is the level of community awareness and buy-in? we need to make sure that the community is ready to welcome back the visitor too. Is there an adequate capacity, so mitigate overcrowding on the trail, parking lot, trail and amenities? Next. Also, when we spoke with our partner across the country, we received many comments. As Justin said a bit earlier, there's an increase of usage in park and trail. For example, the trail in Canmore and Cranbrook, BC that you see on this slide, it's 3 data points that we received from our partners, and you can see significant increase in both of those data points. It's either the peak season was reached in April and May instead of July or August, or a 400% increase of visitation right in May. This increase arrived without direct marketing from the tourism industry. In May, I think it's May 28, May 30, Destination Canada just announced $30 million for the development and the delivery of local lead marketing program to encourage more Canadians to discover their backyard. So from this push of tourism industry, we should anticipate a number of visitations to continue to increase and stay at this high level for a longer period of time. So if we take in consideration the information we received from the survey, from our tourism partner, the increase of usage, we thought that it was really important for TCT to create a tool for trail operator and visitation during the pandemic. It was ready to support our trail group with this new reality. We launched this national guideline on May 28. The guideline includes a toolkit for operation and user. Next slide. So the first thing we looked at was to address the different challenges that the trail manager were facing in making decisions related to the pandemic. For example, should I keep my trail open? Should I close the attraction to ensure physical distancing? How do I manage my volunteers? What are the collateral damage? Should I close my parking lot to manage crowding on the trail? So the guidelines were developed based on the idea that the trail operation and visitation during the pandemic should be a shared responsibility between visitor and trail manager. But we kept in mind also that trail manager have a duty of care. And it's its responsibility first to reduce and mitigate the risk and inform the visitor about those risks so they can share the responsibility with them after that. So the first step we recommend in the guideline is to assess the overall risk of transmission of COVID-19 on their trail section. We look at multiple factors and we came up with 4 key characteristics to create the assessment tool. This assessment tool is made to make sure that the trail operator doesn't take decisions that will lead to bigger problem. So the 4 characteristics are displayed on the slide. Basically, the trail corridor width is one of the important ones to make sure that we are able to maintain physical distance. So a 2 meter and plus wide trail is easier to maintain physical distancing than a single track, a narrow single track. The trail with more high-touch amenities are presumed to have greater potential of indirect transmission than the trail with few or no amenities. The trail that have location where visitors tend to gather or have close prolonged interaction with each other are also presumed to have a bigger risk of indirect transmission. And the trail with greater level of visitation are presumed to pose a higher risk for transmission than trail with lower level of visitation. Next slide. When we combine those 4 characteristics together, we can have an overall risk assessment. The result should be used to help determine what direct and indirect management tools are the most appropriate to apply on the trail. This is an easy assessment to do. We wanted to keep that really easy to do, but it's not an exact science, and it should be used to guide the decision process after that. Next slide. So in the guideline, we'll set up indirect and direct management tool. Those tools are created to reduce or mitigate risk. I will not go through all those tools, but they are really well explained in the guideline. For us, it's really important to use the tool that are related to your level of risk. And we also think that it's important to start with visitor education. So even before they arrive on your site and through the entire trail experience. This education set expectation and increase the knowledge and awareness of each visitor. At this point of the pandemic, we know that we might have a second or third wave. So it's important to shift from the temporary measure that we put in place early in April and May to more permanent and robust risk mitigation system. So when I talk about temporary measure, it's start with removing the danger caution tape that was put on amenities and installing permanent signage. We also know that cleaning and disinfecting amenities and infrastructure is a good way to reduce the transmission. But we know that most trail organizations don't have the resources to do that 24/7. So it's important to make that clear to your visitor that you cannot disinfect and clean all your amenities, and they can help you manage that risk if we ask them to bring their clean trip kit on the trail and they can disinfect their own washroom, for example. Finally, a good communication plan around the measure being taken and shared with all stakeholders and local population is really important. Next. So if we talk about a communication, here's two examples of key messages to visitor that you can find in the guideline. Basically, we split that before you go on the trail, when you're on the trail, and when you return from the trail. And we also created a letter for crew and for volunteers to inform them on new measure and new way to do work on trail. Next slide. So the pandemic forced every organization to take a closer look on their operation, and the trail sector is not different from any sector. At TCT, as a national trail sector leader, in addition to create those guidelines, we aim to support and enhance the capacity of the sector with financial resources, knowledge, and volunteer to create local trail successes. We released the guideline, and we are now reaching out to our trail group to make sure that they have adequate signage, and we're going to support them financially to install those signage and making sure that they have the capacity to produce the sign too. While there's still an incredible needs in trail maintenance and construction, and that's the same in park, we think that we need to retain the trail experience through the COVID-19 lens. So, for example, should I change the location of my interpretive panel that can create gathering around it? Is it the right type of signage that I have to tell a story and provide culture and historical fact about the trail? Or should I look for a new technology? Should I look to partner with a storytelling tour operator? And if I don't have enough parking space, should I collaborate with a commercial center and having shuttle buses between my trail and my and a parking lot a few blocks away? So those are some examples about the rethink that need to happen, but it's part of our next step. So thank you very much, and I will be happy to answer questions at the end of the webinar.
Great. Thank you so much, Matthew. I'm going to turn it over now to Mike. Before I do that, I just want to remind people that you can put your questions into the chat box, and we will ask them at the end. So I'm going to introduce Mike Redpath. He is the Director of Regional Parks for the Metro Vancouver Regional District. He brings over 30 years of progressive experience working in the parks and recreation sector in British Columbia. Mike has been involved in the community development, acquisition, planning, construction, operation, and animation of many significant urban, passive, and active parks, greenways, regional parks, and urban spaces in Metro Vancouver. Mike is a current board member of the British Columbia Recreation and Parks Association and a liaison to the Pacific Parklands Foundation. Great to have you, Mike, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Krista, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure today to be able to speak to you, and I also want to thank the CPRA for giving us this opportunity to share how things have been going in the Metro Vancouver area as we've been dealing with our pandemic response to COVID-19. MJ, next slide, please. Just to give you a bit of an overview of Metro Vancouver, Metro Vancouver Regional District is a federation of 21 municipalities. In our region, we comprise about 2.7 million people, which is slightly more than half of the province of British Columbia. We also have one Treaty First Nation and many other Indigenous communities and First Nations that live and reside within the Metro Vancouver area. Metro Vancouver Regional Parks manages over 14,000 hectares of passive and active open space and some very large parks in and around the Metro Vancouver region. Next slide, please. To give you a sense of where regional parks fit, because I know not in every province, there aren't regional parks in every province. We're not municipal parks and we're not quite provincial parks, but we're very similar to both, and we're sandwiched right in the middle. Metro Vancouver Regional Park visitors typically tend to spend 1 hour to a full day in the parks, and we have many services from access to ocean and beaches to access to mountains and the backcountry as well, and day use and picnic areas, and also active open spaces. Next slide, please. Justin did mention that the Google increase noted 101% increase, and I'm going to speak about our increase in the Metro Vancouver area over the last couple of months with respect to participation and people accessing our parks. But you know, on a normal day, our mandate is to protect the region's significant landscapes and ecosystems and connect people to them. And when COVID came, that was still our mission, but now we're protecting the significant ecosystems, and we're allowing people to connect as long as they're 6 feet apart or 2 meters away from one another. Next slide, please. Throughout the pandemic response to COVID-19, we've really followed our direction from the province of British Columbia. Dr. Bonnie Henry here has become a bit of a rock star in British Columbia, and we followed her advice. She has clearly said, as we've known for a very long time working in the parks and recreation sector, that parks and open spaces, I think, and I've said this before, are the greatest antidote for nature deficit disorder. The benefits are endless, as they say, with respect to participation. And our medical health officer has clearly said, as the other speakers have said, that it's so important for us now, how important it is for us now to have access to outdoor areas, particularly in urban areas, and in such a compact area like Metro Vancouver, 2.7 million people living in a very small, compact area. Access to open space is very key when people are trying to stay at home and distance from one another. So our message in Metro, back one slide please, has been to help keep our parks open and to stay close to home. And we've only had 2 directives given to us. And those directives from the province were, 1, that we will not have gatherings greater than 50 people, and 2, that we will work, we have a guideline that says that people should socially distance or physically distance a minimum of 2 meters or 6 feet. And that's helped guide all of our decision making and policy development. Next slide, please. So looking at our stay close to home, much like many of the provinces, we have a provincial 4-phase plan. And what I'm showing here is a bit of a progressive planning framework that the BC Parks and Recreation Association here has worked on with respect to a phased reopening of recreation or reopening of parks and open spaces. We were clearly in phase 1. We've moved from phase 1 and we're moving into level 2. And what we're finding now that as we move towards level 3, that there's a real blend of what was traditionally indoor programming that's starting to shift to the outdoors because of the lack of ability to respond to the demand and indoor open space facilities. So I think all across the region, that is an emerging issue and something that we're going to have to be cognizant of in the future. It's also a great opportunity, I think, for the parks and recreation sector to take advantage of unused open space. Next slide, please. The British Columbia Parks and Recreation Association's position really is that recreation and parks services are essential to active and healthy communities. And the BCRPA here worked with its members and worked with the province of British Columbia. I'm going to give a shout out to them now to create a guideline for restarting recreation and operations in BC. And this guideline is available, and I'd encourage people to check it out at www.bcrpa.bc.ca. And essentially, this document has been developed by people in parks and recreation in the industry, along with consultation with the province, and is a great restart guide, and I think is a living document that will change over time, but is a good reference point for practitioners across the province. And I encourage people to check it out if you haven't already. Next slide, please. Here in Metro Vancouver, we've seen an extraordinary increase with respect to participation. This year alone, we've had over 6 million people attend just our regional parks alone. In April and in March, we had a 61% recorded increase, which is about 1.5 million people. On one day alone during the COVID-19 pandemic, we had a heat wave in April, March and April, and we recorded 10,000 people visiting one of our beaches adjacent to UBC. It's called Wreck Beach, for those of you that are familiar with it, which it's also a clothing optional beach, but I'm not sure if that was in effect that day. 10,000 people was incredible with respect to attendance at one site in March. Next slide, please. We started a very significant communication program, and we've also, I wanted to mention today that consideration for our employees is paramount as well. We have many staff that both work in offices and out in the park sites. We wanted our staff to make sure that they feel safe and be safe at work. 3 key things that we have focused on in and around the office is the facilitation of physical distancing, which is key. That includes only 2 people in an elevator at a time and limiting proximity of staff working in the parks and recreation offices. Enhanced disinfectation, and cleaning of washrooms. The disinfecting of our washrooms for staff, but also public spaces is key, and we've developed new protocols and policies around that. And also promoting personal hygiene and health. If you're sick, stay home. We are not allowing any more than approximately 40% of our workforce to be in an office at any time. It translates in the field as well. For our crews working in the field maintaining our parks, we've only allowed 1 person per vehicle in all of our crew vehicles, which has presented some operational challenges in the field. And this is an example of one of our signs: do your part, stay 2 meters apart. I'll show you 3 different animals. I believe this is a Pacific dolphin. It's 2 meters in length. Next slide, please. So our key messaging, we have a very strong social media campaign, a very aggressive signage program that went up as soon as the pandemic started in and around March 11th with the World Health Declaration. We've been closely working with the media and responding to several media requests. Weekly Zoom meetings with our member municipalities, all 21 on a Zoom meeting, talking about what our collective response will be. We've had significant measures put into place in and around our Indigenous and First Nations community to prevent increased traffic in public through those areas where reserve lands are adjacent to regional parks. And education has been key as well, particularly in and around our sites where we have backcountry. We wanted to lessen the stress on search and rescue. And as we move into wildfire season, with the increased people coming into the backcountry, we want to make sure that people are aware of what it takes to be responsible when you're entering the backcountry, to be prepared. Next slide, please. Generally, regional parks stayed busy. So unlike in the recreation sector where the facilities shut down, we went crazy. People came to our parks in droves. We did shut down high-touch sites and amenities that we've since reopened as we've moved to phase 2 in our pandemic response. Playgrounds, nature play areas, picnic sites, bookable facilities, those closed, but we've reopened them. Our park interpretation and events have been postponed or canceled generally for the year. Gatherings of 10,000 people or more throughout the city are not permitted when we can't even have gatherings of 50 people. And that's affected our staff in our program and interpretation area, much like our member municipalities. Those staff have been redeployed into park ranger, patroller, or ambassador positions, encouraging people to promote and respect physical distancing in our park sites. It's also provided a sense of security for many members of the public attending our sites, and we've received great feedback from that program. As a solution to encourage physical distancing in the field, many trails have been implemented as one-way trails. Traffic and capacity management have become key issues. I will note that construction and procurement measures, construction has continued for the most part, but our contractors have had challenges with respect to meeting timelines and deliverables, and we're managing through those. And of course, we've worked very closely with the province of BC and BC Parks on the reopening of the camping in the province. Next slide, please. On communication, the utilization of Instagram, Twitter, Facebook has been super key, pushing messages out with respect to closures and having staff that are available not only during your normal operating hours, but on the weekends is something I would recommend is key, because that is the time when we have our, we're generally seeing our uptick in attendance is on weekends. But patterns are developing. People are starting to get it. People are starting to physically distance in the park sites. Physical distancing starts in the parking lot when you arrive at a park. The next slide is a very quick 50-second video that we're pushing out on our website. Our videos are all available on our metrovancouver.org website to promote physical distancing throughout the region. I'm not sure if the sound played well there, but the link is available on our slide deck as well. So just in closing, and Justin mentioned this at the beginning, for us, parks and open spaces are an essential service, and that's been reinforced now more than ever through the pandemic response. But capacity management is not new. Even just last year, the Vancouver Sun, our local provincial paper here, spoofed Metro Vancouver with respect to our capacity issues. People are coming to parks more and more over time. Demand management is key. Developing new tools in the areas of education, enforcement, design, and partnerships, and all of those things working together is key. COVID has amplified our existing capacity issues, and moving into the future, we need to collectively address those. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. for all of your information. And I'm now going to pass it over to our last speaker. Jody Robelos is the Director of Parks, Forestry and Environment for the City of Mississauga. Jody never imagined that a part-time job opportunity as a student would lead to a career in recreation and parks. After over 22 years in recreation, she became the Director of Parks and Forestry at the City of Mississauga in 2018. Jody led the development of the city's first sport plan and climate change action plan. Jody lives, works, and plays in the City of Mississauga with her husband, John, and boys, Luke, Patrick, and Brady. So over to you, Jody. And Jody will take us right through till about 2. We have a couple of questions, so maybe we'll leave a minute at the end for that, and then anything else we don't get to, we will collect and we will get back to you with the answers. So over to you, Jody.
Thanks, Krista. And thank you so much to CPRA for hosting today. As Krista said, my name is Jody Robelos, and I'm the Director of Parks, Forestry, and Environment at the City of Mississauga. So just to give some of you a little perspective on the City of Mississauga, we are Canada's 6th largest city, over 720,000 residents, just west of Toronto and home to Pearson International Airport. We are right on the shoreline of Lake Ontario and have a great waterfront park and trail system. Our city park operations are part of a larger Parks, Forestry, and Environment division. We have over 500 parks, around 400 sport fields, 300 playgrounds, 2 city-run marinas, and 11 cemeteries. Our park operations full-time staff is a mighty 100, and we have a very large number of park seasonal staff, 140 temps and 150 students. And unlike many of you across Canada, we are 100% non-union in our parks and forestry section. So for those in Ontario, you won't, you will know exactly what we're talking about in terms of facility closures, which the province of Ontario ordered the closure of the majority of our park facilities around March 30th. We had made some closures prior to that, and our park staff worked to ensure the closure of these amenities in a very quick time frame. Our year-round public washrooms in parks, which we have 11 locations, stayed open, and that was I think we were one of the few municipalities, at least in our surrounding area, that kept public washrooms open. But as many of you know, there's a lot of demand for public washrooms during that time, even from our contractors who were out doing work and needed access. Our parkland and trails remained open, so they were available for passive use and walk-through use. We did close some parking lots in areas to help send the message to stay local, and really wanted to limit the number of people who were using our facilities. And we did close Korea Park, which is a cherry blossom specimen site, and had webcams installed so that members of the public could follow the blossoms, because it's a really popular park. So changes in provincial legislation have come fast and furious, and I guess one of our biggest challenges is we're finding out what those legislative changes are at the same time the public is finding out what those legislative changes are. So we're watching the news, hearing the Premier make the announcement, and we've been responding fairly quickly to some of these changes. Our council at the first round of opening in Ontario had really asked us to take a look and meet specifically with the Regional Peel Medical Officer of Health prior to making our own plan for reopening. And our council and mayor have been big proponents of the province really taking a regional approach to reopening. Where we were in the Greater Toronto, Hamilton area in terms of COVID cases was a very different picture than where people in Northern Ontario or outside the GTHA were experiencing. So we've seen a bit of a shift from the province and some changes in terms of how reopening is moving forward. So it's good to see that we're looking at local health data when making those decisions. So our phased approach in Mississauga, phase 1, was marinas, golf courses, which opened on May 16th, one of our public boat launches, and a partnership on community gardens, which to help with food security, we wanted to make sure we got moving on that very quickly. Phase 2 was a bigger push for us. So we have community tennis clubs, which are partnership programs where our groups are running tennis facilities as well as our own individual facilities. So all of those processes needed to be put in place, and starting June 1st, we opened a number of facilities. Now there's certain amenities that we've decided to remain closed and are remaining closed and to be determined right now. And for us, those are some of our multi-sport basketball courts, our sport field courts. Next slide, please. Batting cages, and some of our community facilities. Right now, playgrounds and outdoor fitness equipment remain closed under provincial order, as do splash pads and wading pools, but we know that we'll see that moving forward in the next wave of opening. So we're expecting that the province will make an announcement on Monday for the Greater Toronto Hamilton area in terms of what phase we can move into in opening, and we'll be ready to go next with that. For us, in terms of enforcement and key messaging, our enforcement has really been on an education and information sharing focus. And for the city the size of the city of Mississauga, I think in total up to date, we have laid 35 park amenity tickets, which is very low if you're looking compared to some other municipalities, but we really have taken an inform and educate approach, and our recreation staff have been assisting as park ambassadors out in the parks, our full-time recreation staff who have a lot of experience in dealing with the public, so that's been extremely helpful. Our strategic communications team and our marketing team has done a really great job at trying to get that message out. It's been very confusing week by week in terms of what's open, what's not open, and keeping staff straight is one thing, and trying to keep the public informed on some of the changes has been near impossible. So our operations team and our full city team has done a really great job in getting out there and being present in our facilities. So some local challenges and opportunities we've had. I mean, the closures in itself presented a huge challenge, and I think I mentioned initially we have a fairly small full-time staff complement compared to our temporary and seasonal staff complement, and those temporary and seasonal staff starts were all delayed due to COVID. So normally we would have 140 of our temporary staff starting the beginning of April, and they didn't come on board until May. So that put some additional pressure on our full-time staff, and we did do some changes and move some people around into our key areas of focus, and litter being one. So we are responsible for parks sanitation. So our sanitation trucks go out and empty all of the garbage and recycling in parks, and with members of the public home, and doing a lot of spring cleaning, and the region limiting litter pickup and pickup of additional large items. We saw a significant increase of illegal dumping in our parks, which, given the restraints of COVID, put a huge pressure on us. Also seeing an increase of homeless encampments and bonfires and general park bylaw infractions in parks during this time as well. Mike mentioned this, and really clearly stood out for us is we are in the middle of a yard master plan study right now with our colleagues in works operation and maintenance, and we already know that we have some significant challenges in terms of our staff space, and with COVID-19 it certainly exacerbated the existing challenges we had. I have one facility where I think we had 15 to 20 people scheduled to work out of that facility, and I can now fit 3 due to the physical distancing restrictions. So we have done a great job. Staff have turned around rental of trailers, additional vehicles, and we have a little bit more of a decentralized operation this year with staff working out of other facilities, but they're doing a really great job. All of the outreach programs that we normally run couldn't be run this year, and that again had impacts for things like litter in our parks. We normally ran a litter cleanup program and a community shoreline cleanup program. All of those things were canceled this year, so putting more pressure on our existing staff. And what we've seen and other people have spoken to is this overwhelming interest and value of parks, trails, and open space in the city. And We all know it, we live it, we work in it every day, but it sure is nice, and you know, it has its challenges with everybody visiting our parks, but it sure is nice to really see the value and have members of the public articulate the value of our parks, trails, and open space. So just some thoughts and reflection that we have here moving forward. Obviously, our staffing model challenges in terms of our relatively small number of full-time staff has been an issue and challenge, and looking at examination of standards and protocols. And for a lot of us, we've been in the field this whole time. And so as there's other areas within the city that are now sort of starting to come back to work, we want to make sure there's consistency in standards and protocols, and that we're all working from the same playbook. Training has been a challenge. We've had to not bring in large groups of staff, bring them in smaller groups, and our training modules have changed and had to be dynamic this year, as well as our hiring process. And, you know, our standard hiring process isn't working when we're finding that, you know, we need to be prepared to shift and change and open amenities and facilities, and therefore bring on those staff associated with those facilities in a very short order. And importance of proactive communication. We've had some great innovative uses. We repurposed some of our works construction signage to be used in our facilities. We've had our marketing team doing a great job, and really just recognizing our staff for doing the job that they're doing out there every day. You know, we know that people appreciate them, but we also know that, you know, everyone's out there with their cameras taking pictures, and you know, staff are feeling pretty challenged on a daily basis. So we've been really lucky, and we're doing a great job, and our council has been very supportive given the challenges. But, you know, to speak to what everybody's spoken to, I mean, our normal weekend at our waterfront parks has been our everyday at our waterfront parks. It's been unbelievable to see the visitation, but we're all happy we're here, and happy we're in the chosen path that we're in. So with that, I'll just say thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Krista.
Thank you so much, Jody. I appreciate it. So we are at 2 o'clock, but we've only had a couple of questions. So I thought what I would do is, if you're able to stay on for another couple of minutes, then I'll have an opportunity for people to answer some questions. Maybe if we just go to just about 5 minutes or so. Like I said, if you can remain, great. Otherwise, we will have the recording for you to listen to. So I'll start with Justin. Can you expand on what you meant by the role of partners to help with increasing spend? Are you talking about partners in the parks or in the surrounding communities?
Yeah, good question. Thinking about it quickly, I think it includes both partners in the parks as well as partners in the surrounding communities. And predominantly what comes to my mind is looking at our at our private sector, and what operators might be providing visitor experiences that are a good match for our park systems, but may not be working in our parks right now or on our trails right now. Other opportunities is taking a look at what visitor experiences we offer in our parks, and looking at and thinking through how private operators could come in and enrich those experiences. So if most of them are fully independent traveler type experiences, self-guided type experiences, is there opportunities for local guides, local operators, local businesses to come in and deepen that enrichment? Or even our Indigenous communities and some of their storytellers are all examples of new relationships that many park agencies are already providing and trying to develop, but trying to expedite those in a time of need. And then I think another example is looking at, you know, things as simple as bike rentals on our trail systems, and enabling those local rental and outfitting organizations or businesses to operate. So really quickly, just a few examples, and I'm sure Matthew and Mike and Jody have some other thoughts on that.
Maybe I'll just move on to the next question so that I can get two more in. Most of our municipal parks have picnic and playground equipment. We'll be talking about playgrounds in 2 webinars from now. We have kept everything closed. Any suggestions on how to do otherwise?
So maybe I could start there. We've reopened ours. Unlike Jody, our picnic areas are open. What we've done is we've done a bit of a capacity analysis for bookable picnic shelters as an example. So we're posting on our picnic shelters how many people can go in them, and we're not allowing the rental of them to exceed that number of people either. So that seems to be working. We're a week in to that now. I think it was June the 1st, we opened all of our playgrounds. And what I think was key is here in Metro Vancouver, again, I talk about the compact nature of the region, all of the member municipalities work together. So we had a relatively coordinated, it wasn't totally coordinated, but relatively coordinated approach to opening. We have signage up saying, please respect the physical distancing at the playground sites. We are continuing with regular patrols, and we're not increasing the cleaning frequency of the playgrounds. So different, and people are out using the playgrounds. My neighborhood parks and also in our regional parks, people are using them. People have been picnicking in our parking lots. They're moving back into the more traditional areas. We never shut down our picnic tables. We left them open throughout the whole pandemic in phase 1 and phase 2. And we saw people taking advantage of those seating areas. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Great, thank you, Mike. I'm going to ask one last question, and then, of course, that's my phone ringing. And but I know Matthew has to go, so I just wanted to thank Matthew for his time today. Really appreciate it. And then the one last question is: one of our municipal parks is located by the river and often used by tourists who travel the river by canoe or kayak. We have a comfort station, toilets and showers available. We are thinking about opening them, but we do not have the resources to clean them regularly. Can we unlock the comfort station with a poster informing people to use at their own risk and or clean or disinfect before using? Anybody want to take that one?
I think, Mike, do you want to?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll start there. So, we have many wilderness areas and locations in along the water as well, with pit toilets as an example. We've just maintained our cleaning practices for them. And we've posted on the doors, please bring your own hand sanitizer. I know BC Parks, Justin mentioned this as well. Matthew mentioned it, the idea of a clean trip kit. If you're in the backcountry, bring your hand sanitizer, bring anything you need, pack it in and pack it out, is something that I know the province is encouraging, and we're encouraging for the backcountry too.
And I think you need to, in addition to follow whatever the current either directives or regulations are within your local community, but outside of those, if there is no directives there, posting them on what level of service you are providing within those facilities and transferring that liability to the user is certainly an accepted practice, and one that is within Matthew's set of guidelines for the Trans-Canada Trail as well.
Great. So MJ just tells me that all of a sudden we had a whole bunch of questions flood in. So we can either stay on the line for another hour or two, or or what I think I'm going to suggest is that we will, how about we take one more question? If people want to stay on, they are welcome. I know obviously some people need to leave. So maybe I'll read one more. Are there any measures being taken to keep facilities open if there are future waves or shutdowns due to COVID, recognizing that there are just jurisdictional issues?
So in Metro Vancouver, I think what we've learned is how to shut down our facilities and how to reopen them. If there's a need for us to revert back, we've got a great system in place because we've just gone through it. And we will continue to follow direction from the provincial medical health officer and the BC Centre for Disease Control. If we receive provincial direction, we'll respond accordingly. But I think our experience in shutting down and reopening has taught us a lot, and we're prepared to do that again if need be.
Jody, did you have anything you wanted to add, or?
Yeah, I guess the challenge is, are we shutting down because the province is ordering us to shut down, or is there a local issue that's causing us to shut down? And I think where we're at is, really looking at things at a more regional approach. And so we made certain decisions to close facilities because they made sense to us. We, opening batting cages, but keeping fields closed when those two things are sitting side by side from each other doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think if anything, we've learned, what the province says in terms of what's required to be closed, but then what also makes sense for a community and to be able to message out. And that's a big lesson for us that we've learned now for sure.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we've kept track of all of the questions that have just come in, and we will endeavor to put them together in terms of whether or not there's some like questions and get some answers back out to you. MJ will, once the link is ready, we will have everything out on the website, and you will get an email with some answers to the questions that we didn't have time to get to today. I do appreciate those who were able to stay on, and certainly, no problem if people had to go. We did say 1 to 2. But I did want to mention as well that we do have another, this is a series of 5, so this was our first one. The second one will take place Thursday, June 18th at noon. Eastern time, and it will focus on opening of aquatic facilities, and you can see the list of speakers for that webinar. Again, all of our webinars are recorded, so you're welcome to go back onto the website and hear them again or share them with your colleagues. And as I said again, we will make sure you get some answers to additional questions. In the meantime, I would like to thank all of our speakers today who did an outstanding job of presenting what again could have been 2 days worth of information into 10 or so minutes for you today. So again, thank you so much. And to those of you who spent an hour and a bit with us, we appreciate your time. We'll look forward to seeing you next week as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, folks. See ya.